Did you know that in Middle Eastern culture, in the biblical times, that it was not acceptable for a man to run? It would bring shame to him if he just took off running. It was a sign of weakness. It was a sign of panic, loss of self-control. And if a man just took off running, he would be shamed for that. Another reason why they didn't do it is because due to the clothing that they wore, they would have to hike up their garment, expose their legs, and that was a no-no as well in those days. So that may seem like a silly fact or something for me to just start a video off with, but when you know that and then you read a parable that Jesus taught, some people call it the prodigal son, some people call it the lost son, some people call it the loving father, whatever it is. It's in Luke chapter 15. And you read about, if you've never heard of it, I'll break it down as quick and as simply as I can. There's a father who has two sons, and his youngest son comes to him and he asks his father for his inheritance early. And the father grants it to him. And it's just a few days later that son packs up and moves off to a far away country. And it's in that country that he spends everything that he has. That's why they call it. That's why a lot of people call it the prodigal son, because prodigal means wasteful spending, right? So he joins himself to this country. You kind of read later on in the parable that he wasted a lot of the money on harlots, right? He gave this country everything that he had. He wasted his entire inheritance. And then after he had given this country everything that he had, a famine arose in that land, right? There's a message there that you give the world everything you got and you're still missing something on the inside. A famine will arise eventually, and you will realize that you gave it everything you had and it gave nothing in return. But after he gives this country everything that he has, he finds himself laying in a pig's pen. And it's actually in the pig's pen where it says that he comes to himself, right? He is at rock bottom, and it's at rock bottom that he begins to come to himself. It's when he begins to take account for where he is, what's going on, and it's also where he realizes what he needs to do. Rock bottom can be ugly. Rock bottom can be painful. Rock bottom can be a rough place to be, but rock bottom is also sometimes the best place to start building your life off of. And that's what this young man did. He tested the waters of the world. He found out that it didn't have anything to offer, and he finds himself in the pig's pen, and he realizes, I know what I need to do. And he begins to think about, how ridiculous is it that I am my father's child, and my father's servants back at home want for nothing. They have plenty to eat. They are well taken care of. And look at me and the mess that I have gotten myself in. I need to go home. And it's from that moment on that he begins to prepare a speech for what he's going to say to his father when he sees him. And it's along the lines of, look, I know I messed up. I know I am no longer worthy to be called your son. I just want to come home, and if you'll have me, I will be your servant from here on out. Not your son, your servant. And he begins to make his way home. Now, the one thing that the son doesn't know is the whole time he's been gone, every day the father would go out on his balcony, look off into the distance, and hope that his son, who he didn't know was ever going to come home. He didn't know if he was dead. He didn't know what had happened to him. But every day he would go and look off into the distance, just hoping to catch a glimpse of his son coming home. Well, one day the father goes out onto the balcony. He sees his son off in the distance. And the next thing you know, this father takes off running. It's just a little 2 words in the middle of a verse. And it says that when he saw him, he ran. And if you don't know that little detail about Middle Eastern culture and the shame and the reproach that would bring this man for running, you miss an amazing detail in this parable that Jesus taught. And he taught it specifically before this, the father saw his son, and it was no longer about culture. It was no longer about what the community would think. This was a father and a son. This was his son who he didn't know if he was ever going to see again. This was his son that he didn't know whether he was alive or whether he was dead. And he sees him coming home, and he does not care about tradition. He does not care about culture. This is about the love between a father and a child. And he takes off running. Now, there's another detail that I've learned about Middle Eastern culture in that time. There was a term, a phrase that was, I think I'm saying this right. I apologize if it's not right, but I think the term would be called kazaza. Now, this was a public shaming ceremony that a community would do if someone from that community left and wasted all that they had in a Gentile nation, or they lost everything they had to Gentiles. A Gentile is someone who is not a Jew. Then when that person would try to return home, they would force that person out of the gates of the community. They would take a clay pot, they would slam it on the ground in front of them, and this was a sign of shame and of separation from this community. They would make this person feel as terrible as they could for going to a Gentile nation and losing everything they had. And that is probably another reason why the father took off running. Because when the world wanted to throw a ceremony of shame and make this child feel terrible for making the mistake of losing everything that he had, the father wanted to cut that off, get there before the community could. And, well, you know what happens when the father finally makes it to his son as he is sprinting and running to meet his child? The first thing he does when he sees his child, he gets him around the neck and he gives him a big old kiss on the cheek. And he says, "This is my son in whom I thought was dead, and he is alive. He has come home." The son is trying to give the speech to the dad. He's like, "Look, I know I'm not worthy to be your son. I come home as a servant." The father doesn't even acknowledge the speech. He doesn't even acknowledge what his son has to say. He doesn't want to hear that. He calls one of his servants over and says, "Hey, go get the wardrobe, go get his ring, go get his sandals, and kill that fatted calf, because we are going to celebrate the return of my child coming home." The world wanted to throw a ceremony of shame. The father wanted to celebrate the return. Do you see the difference there? And when you begin to really think about what Jesus is saying here, because remember, a parable is a physical example about something spiritual. So the father is God. The parable son, or the prodigal son, that was me. Maybe that was you. Maybe that is you. Maybe you have messed up. Maybe you have made a mistake. Maybe you have backslidden. And maybe you are at that rock bottom place in your life when you are realizing, what have I done? Look at the mess that I have made. I know what I need to do. I know I need to go home, but I'm worried that when I return home, there's going to be shame. There's going to be criticism. There's going to be condemnation. There's going to be judgment. And you might receive some of that from people. You might receive some of that from the world, but you're not going to receive that from the Father. You're going to receive an embrace. You're going to receive love. You're going to receive the compassion of a father who was worried that he would never see his child again, and will embrace you with love and a ceremony to welcome you home. He will run to meet you halfway. The Father's love supersedes any tradition. The Father's love supersedes any kind of community ceremony that they want to throw. No, the Father is worried about the child coming home. And if that's you, if you're worried about coming home, about what everybody's going to think, if you think you made too much of a mess, if you are at rock bottom, at least rock bottom is a solid foundation. And Jesus says that anyone who builds his life off of the rock, he's the rock, that he is the Christ. And if you will build your life off of that, man, that is the most solid foundation you could ever build your life on. So if you're that prodigal child who went astray, if you're that prodigal child who backslid, if you're that prodigal child who is worried about what the world's going to think and judge you for the mistakes that you've made, just know the Father will run to meet you on your way home, embrace you with love, a kiss on the cheek, and want to have a celebration. Do you know that Jesus said that, man, when one sinner gets saved, turns to faith in Jesus, that there is joy in the midst of angels in heaven. There is a celebration. The earth might not get it. The people of down here might judge and condemn and question whether or not you're worthy to come home, but that's why we want to keep our mind in heavenly places. That's why we want to have heavenly treasures, right? That's because in heaven there's a celebration. In earth there's this ridiculous judgment and condemnation, but in heaven they are just celebrating that one that was lost came home, that one that was dead is alive, and that Father will run as fast as he can to meet you halfway. Draw near to God, and he'll draw near to you. All right? I love you guys. If you're that prodigal child, just come on home. Don't worry about what everybody thinks. Just come on home. It'll be the best decision you ever make.